I'm RJ Nestor, productivity consultant and official Tana ambassador. And in this video, I'm going to talk about one aspect of my Tana for Tasks core template, T4TC, as I like to call it, and that is recurring tasks, because I get asked about recurring tasks a lot. And in this video, I'm actually going to show you exactly how I built them. So you can see the commands. It'll be a little bit of a longer video, perhaps a little more meandering than my normal videos, but because it's showing you everything about recurring tasks, I want to make sure I cover all the bases. So this will allow you to see how you can build them for yourself. It will also, I think, indicate to you just how elaborate it is when you're working in the background and kind of figuring out the logic and how these pieces go together. But at the same time, the thinking may be elaborate, but the execution in Tana is actually fairly straightforward once you understand how commands work. So I am going to put a link, you can see it on the screen there, to a T4TC directly. So if having watched this you say, well, I like this, but I'd rather just purchase it so I don't have to build it myself, you can do that. It's only $37, and so it's not a particularly expensive offering there, and you can get it in a bundle, a Tana starter kit bundle with essential Tana skills for a little bit of a discount if you're also just getting started in Tana. So to give you an idea of how all of this is put together, let me start with a quick demo of how they work. And it's on my screen to my right, so my apologies. I'm going to be looking off that direction a fair amount of this video, but I'm here with you, I promise. So I created a few nodes here just to get us started. I'll highlight and create all of these as recurring tasks. And now that they're set up like this, you see there's a little rocket ship there. What that indicates is that we have not yet set up the parameters required for recurring tasks, because a recurring task is really a template for a scheduled task. And so we'll say we want to first schedule this for Monday. And you'll see in my system what's going on in the background here is that it does extend tasks. So assigned, bin, horizon, scheduled on, those three tasks or those three fields rather, are arriving because they are part of the task supertag. Everything else here, originally scheduled on, how many, recurrence interval, repeat from, all of those are arriving because it's a recurring task. So if I want it to recur every Monday, I'm going to start by putting it for this coming Monday. And I'm going to say I want it to recur every 1 week. And we want to repeat from, there are two options here, scheduled or completed. We're going to say scheduled. And that means that even if we don't get to it till Tuesday and it doesn't get completed till Tuesday, the next instance will return on Monday. And having set those parameters, then we click our little rocket ship, and when these two buttons are available here, you can see that means that this is an officially set up recurring task. So I'm going to do the rest of these fairly quickly here. The first of this will need to be, since it's every third of the month, we'll want to schedule this for a third. Let's say the next one coming up is November 3rd, so we'll schedule it like that. That's a little cleaner. Every 1 month. And once again, we're going to say repeat from scheduled, because if I don't get it done till the 5th, I still want it to show up on the 3rd, okay? Every 27 days, we'll say the first one is scheduled for tomorrow, okay, and I'll say every 27 days. Now, in this case, probably scheduled from, or repeat from, rather, completed, because if something's every 27 days, odds are pretty good we don't need to land on a particular day or day of the month. So when I get it done, it'll just be scheduled for 27 days from then. Click our rocket ship. Every 3 months. Well, that doesn't really have a particular starting date either. So let's just pick one. Let's say next Monday is a good enough place to start. That's last Monday, so we'll kick it ahead a week. And we'll say it needs to happen every 3 months. So it's essentially quarterly at that point. But because I didn't specify a particular, mention that it needed to be on a particular date, let's go ahead and make it repeat from completed as well. If you needed it to do like March 3rd, June 3rd, September 3rd, December 3rd, you could specify that you want to repeat from scheduled. Every 2 years on April 26th. So our first one we'll hear will be April 26th. That's going to give us this year, so let's kick that ahead a year to 2024. And we'll say every 2 years. Okay, so this is how they're set up. Obviously, this one's from scheduled. I don't want it to show up on the 27th if I don't get it done till the 27th. And these two, I didn't click the rocket ship yet, so let's click those. These are all now set up as recurring tasks in my system. And here is how they work. So when you use my approach, tasks will arrive via query on you when you get to the certain day that there will be a query for tasks that are due on that day, also overdue, so that they don't get missed, which means that each of these will normally show up as a reference within that query. Since these are all set for different dates, we're going to emulate the idea of reference here. We're going to pretend this is an agenda down here that arrives on a certain day, and we'll put them here. And now these here are all references to what's going on up here. Let me open recurring task quick demo in the far side here, and open these on this side. So on the right over here, we have the originals, and here we have the references as they would exist in an agenda. Okay, so here's now how they work, and then I'll get into the under the hood of what makes them work. So you can see this one's set up here when I open it on the right side. This is the same recurring task, same entity here, one side to the other. Okay, you can see Monday, October 23rd is the first one here, Monday, October 23rd. If I complete this, that's what this first button means. This over here is going to stay. It actually reuses the same recurring task, but it's going to be updated to the following Monday, which will be Monday, October 30th. Over here on this side, this one will disappear, the reference will disappear, and in its place will be a completed task set up from today. So I'm going to click this. You can see this over here updated to Monday, October 30th. This over here is now a completed task. And it's a clone, it's a duplicate of the original that remains in place. Okay, so you can see that one worked just fine. So let's open the next one here. And the next one, I'm going to, instead of completing it, I'm going to push it. So pushing is the next thing. That means it's going to be, I want to just move to the next occurrence or recurrence without doing anything with it. I'm not going to complete it. If I click that, it's still going to disappear from the left side here because I don't want to see it in an agenda anymore. But it's going to update to December 3rd over here. So I'm going to click push. And you can see it's now December 3rd over here, and it no longer exists in that agenda. Okay, so let's look at our every 27 days here. So every 27 days, bring it up to being roughly equal in location here, and make sure it doesn't get behind my head in the video. Let's imagine that I actually want to move this ahead. Actually, I won't move this one ahead. I'll move the one down below ahead. So with this one here, when I click on this one to complete it, you'll see it automatically jumps ahead from tomorrow to Wednesday, November 15th, which is 27 days from now, and it leaves in its place over here the completed task. All right, so that's, you can see how those work. Now I'm going to, and I had originally set this one up to repeat from completed. Let's make this one repeat from scheduled. And mainly just, it makes things a little bit easier in the demo here. Okay, so, and you'll see that all of the stuff that you use to set it up becomes a hidden field once you've set it up, so it doesn't get quite so cluttered down below. Okay, so this is every 3 months from scheduled. The reason I wanted to point that out and move that around is we are going to reschedule this. I can't get it done today, so I'm going to move it ahead, and these 3 commands actually come with the task, super tag. So this is because it's a task. I'm rescheduling it for 3 days from now. It's going to actually disappear from here because if I'm rescheduling an agenda item, I don't actually want to keep it over here. But you'll see it'll update to October 26th over here. So boom, disappears over here. Now it's October 26th. For the sake of continuing the demo, let's bring it back. So new reference over here. So now it says October 26th, as you can see. And let's say I wanted to push it another week. I'll click it again. Boom. Now it's Thursday, November 2nd. And once again, disappeared from over here, as it should, from an agenda. Okay, we'll bring it back Thursday, November 2nd. Now let's say, okay, now I want to complete it. Remember, October 23rd was the first day that we had it set for. So that means if it's going to be 3 months from scheduled, we should have January 23rd, not February 2nd, not Groundhog Day in the United States here. So we'll need it to show up on January 23rd. Let's see if that happens. When I click this is done, it'll disappear over here. We should get January 23rd, not February 2nd over here. And as you can see, January 23rd, 2024. So it knew to go to when it was originally scheduled rather than when we actually did it. And then likewise, every 2 years will function similarly. I'll make sure it's not behind my head here. And if I were to move this ahead a week, and now it's May 2nd of that, and I'll bring it back over here so we can see if it's every 2 years, it should reschedule. If I push it, let's say, it should reschedule to April 26th of 2026, and that's exactly what it did, okay? So that's how it works. That's how it functions. Let's go into the template and have a look at what's going on, what makes it function in this way. I'm going to close this panel here, and we'll leave this one up if we need any reference points over there. So I'm inside the template on the left side of the screen here. If I click on template components and then I click on recurring tasks, which I'd already done, you can see there's just the one recurring task field, or excuse me, super tag that comes along with that. Within it are the fields. Oh yeah, I need to, right click it here and choose configure. Within it are 3 fields that come along because it extends task, arise and assign, bin, and scheduled on. And then 4 fields that are specific to recurring tasks. Originally scheduled on, and you see it says don't mess with this one. This is what is making it possible when I move something ahead a week. It can still go back and reschedule based on where it was originally scheduled. This is where that's getting captured. So don't mess with it unless you have a specific reason that something's gotten screwed up and you need to jump in and do that and reset it. How many is the number of days, weeks, months, or years. So it's not how many recurrences do you want. It's not one of those where you say do it for 6 times and then stop. It's how many days or years or weeks or months or whatever. Recurrence interval is the day, week, month, or year. By separating those, it makes it a lot easier to use them on the backside, as I'll show you here in a minute. And then repeat from can be either completed or scheduled. So that's what's going on inside the recurring task super tag. These are the commands that are powering things. The ones you see and interact with are these 5. In what you're using, it only appears that there are 3, but that's because these 2 look the same and these 2 look the same. They're very, very similar, but one of each is for when you do it from completed, that's rescheduling the next occurrence based on today's date, and the other is when you're doing it from scheduled based on the originally scheduled date. So there's one of each for those. There's a rocket ship that is the initializing the new recurring task, and all that's really doing, it encourages you to remember to set the parameters, but also what it does is then that allows it to set the originally scheduled on for the first time. And so it's using that as the reference point for whether it's established or not. And I'll walk through each of these commands in a minute. And then there are 4 administrative commands that are inside these others. So these are all referenced inside these other recurring tasks, the ones that the recurring task commands, the ones that you are actually interacting with. So let's walk through the first command here. So first thing to know about commands is that the magic that it determines when they show up is handled by node filters. So this command here, actually, you know what? Let's not use that one first. Let's use this one first, since it's the rocket ship. And it's fairly simple, all right? So this one, the node filter, the only thing it's looking for, and this, I'll show you how it gets added to recurring tasks in a second. The only thing it's looking for is whether originally scheduled on is set. And if it's not set, that means that this recurring task is not launched yet. And so we're going to go ahead and put that rocket ship on it. And what the reference date does is it uses what you put in your scheduled on date inside an insert relative date command. So it says in 0 days, meaning same day as, look up the scheduled on field value and then put that into originally scheduled. So the date string is the way that Tana is determining, it's sort of using its logic to figure out what in relationship to the reference date are we going to put in the target node. In this case, the reference date is what you have already put in scheduled on. That's why you have to do scheduled on, how many, and those things first. And then once it does that, it's going to say, okay, scheduled on is our reference date. You want to do it next Monday. What is 0 days from next Monday? Well, next Monday. It's the same thing. And that allows you to then put in the target node originally scheduled on the same value that's in scheduled on. And there are a few times that reset reference date. You can see it's one of the admins here. We actually use that in a couple of these other commands as well. But that's all that's happening with the rocket ship, is it's establishing that the originally scheduled on is not set, and then when you click it, that's how it determines whether it shows up. And then when you click it, it sets it to the same date as whatever's in the scheduled on field. Okay, and once they're set up, you then have one or the other of these, depending on whether you said scheduled, repeat from scheduled or repeat from completed. You have that one, and you'll have the one down here if you said scheduled from repeat from completed. And you'll see that the node filters for those two are identical. I'll stop scrolling back and forth between them. You can take my word for it. And they are, if it is repeat from completed, if it is not done, and if the originally scheduled on is set. So that means it's been launched. So if those three things happen, or the case, this button will show up. When you click it, this is the fun of the completed buttons. First, it sets the status to done. And you may remember when you saw those, we actually keep the originals, but this is how we do that. First, we set the status to done. Then we run a command line command to duplicate that node. So we've set it to done and we've duplicated it, which means we now have a new original node marked done that is identical to the reference we had before. Then we reset the done status back to node has no checkbox, which is in fact a not done state, but it keeps us from adding a checkbox on. I took the checkboxes off in T4TC because we're rigging this with commands. Actually checking the checkbox kind of messes up the flow of the commands. So I took it off of tasks and recurring tasks so that that's not even an option to click. That way you won't get into a habit where you accidentally click something you shouldn't be clicking. So in other words, this then, it sets it to done, clones it, and then sets it back to undone. So now we're back, we're still working on the original task. And the way this is set up, you have to, because commands can only continue to cycle if they're still working on the same node. So it would have to have another command if we used a new node to create a new task. So we're still working on the original. Then we schedule the next task from completed. We look at what is in the what is today's date, because this is relative date, and you can see there's no reference date here in this particular insert relative date. There is, I'll note this comparison here. There is a reference date here, because when we're rescheduling from scheduled, we want to use originally scheduled on as the reference date. Whereas when we're rescheduling from completed, all we have to do is use today. So today is default. So I don't have to put that in here. And it's going to say in how many recurrence interval. So in other words, in 1 day, or in 27 days, or in 7 days, or in 1 week, or whatever whatever you've put into those two fields will now be put in here as the relative day string, or date string. The date time granularity, of course, is day. We're not going to go to the millisecond or anything. And the target node is scheduled on. So we're going to reschedule this using the string from today's date, which is default for insert relative date. Then, because it's completed, we would do it for pushing as well. Because it's completed, we also want to go ahead and reuse reset reference date, which we saw at the beginning. That takes whatever we just put into scheduled on and also puts it into originally scheduled on, because this is a new instance. So we are, it's preset the same way a new one would be set. Reset procedure checklist. This is actually something that relates to another thing that's happening. You wouldn't have to have this, but because I use recurring tasks often to deliver procedures to me as well, this removes that checklist, which has the effect of just resetting it. It'll reset it to the default. And so it's a way of clearing off a checklist that you were using with that recurring task, so that the new one doesn't have everything checked. You can skip this if you're building it yourself and you don't have a similar approach. And then remove reference from agenda if it's a reference. This is just a command line command of remove reference. Now this, if you're in the T4TC and you've watched my videos, they actually have 2 videos that talk about an error that isn't an error. This is the command that throws that error. If you are working with an original node, it's safe. You won't remove it. You won't remove it because it's not a reference. However, because it's not a reference, attempting to run a remove reference command will make Tana say, hey, this isn't a reference. What do you think you're doing? So you get what looks like an error, and it is, from Tana's standpoint, an error. But from a T4TC standpoint, that's just the acknowledgement that that command ran, but it was running on something that isn't a reference. So if it's running on a reference, it'll remove it. And that's what we normally want. It'll pop it out of the agenda because we don't want both the completed task and the original that is now not done still sitting in the agenda. But it does make for one slightly confusing thing when you get that error message. But that's what this command does. So that's that. The only difference between that and this one here, which is the version for scheduled, is one, the node filter, only differences, I should say. The node filter is set for it to show up when it's scheduled as opposed to when it is repeat from completed. And you can see that's the only difference in the node filter, which means these can be the same button appearance. The command can have the same name because they'll only show up at times that are opposite one another. This one won't show up if this one down here won't show up if this is set to completed. The other one won't show up if it's set to scheduled. So this one will only show up if it's set to scheduled, not done, originally scheduled on. And this is the same schedule. This is the same rhythm of marking it done and duplicating it. This is the same marking it back undone. The only other thing that's a difference in this one is that the insert relative date, rather than being default and using today, it points back and uses originally scheduled on. This is the little bit of magic that makes it so even if you have completed a task on that was originally scheduled for October 23rd on November 3rd, it will know to use October 23rd in the scheduling of the next instance. Okay, so you can think of it that way, and that's how that works. So otherwise, this button is exactly the same. And now the comparison to these, the only thing with these are, because you're pushing to the next, in other words, you're not completing the task, they don't leave a completed task behind. So it doesn't have to do that done state, duplicate, and then reset done, because all it's doing is just removing it from here and resetting. So these two are identical to the ones above. It just doesn't do the setting it as done and duplicating. The rest is the same. And you can see I'm actually using schedule next task from completed, schedule next task from previous scheduled. Those are pat recreated commands that I'm just using inside of these. So that's how these commands function to make the magic happen that's going on over here. Now, I won't talk about the +1, +3, +7 here because those are actually coming from the task supertag, except to say that what they are doing is a fairly simple, using an insert relative date to, based on today, or actually based on when it's currently scheduled, to move it ahead a day or move it ahead 3 days or move it ahead a week, 7 days. But those are arriving via the task supertag. So this is how it works. This is the functionality that allows you to very easily create recurring tasks that are reliable, that are going to show up on the dates you expect them to show up on, and because I've removed the checkboxes, make it far less likely that user error is going to make those go away in some way. So hopefully this is helpful. If you do want to build this from scratch, this is you can use this and pause it where you need to pause it to get a sense of how to do it. If it's something you'd just like to have, now that you see how it works, and also understanding that the rest of the template here has a lot of similar magic happening in order to make these things occur. It's just $37. It's T4TC is not terribly expensive, and actually via Gumroad I use the thing that allows you to set it so the price is based on a certain area of the world or certain countries' purchasing power, the purchasing power parity, so that it may even be cheaper where you are than that. So that is how it works. Hopefully that makes some sense to you and gives you some clarity on what you'd like to do if you'd like to have recurring tasks in your Tana setup.